Let's call the Planning Commission Halloween edition meeting to order, 6:11 p.m. We have 4 commissioners here, so that's a quorum. Let's get right into it. We're starting a little bit late. Let's start with the any amendments to the agenda and announcements. I think we can just take these two together. I think we have some updates on projects and applications from staff.
Yeah. So at around 4:45 today, we submitted the municipal planning grant application for the walk bike plan. Yeah, that was exciting.
Right.
Thanks to Steve for his help on it, and to Prudence and BCAT for giving us a letter of support along with Local Emotion. One thing that was quite interesting in putting it together is the budget that we have for it is kind of tenable for a consultant to do. So we were able to put in a scope of work, but I think that it's going to take staff time. You know, if we are awarded it, it might be a little bit smaller in scope. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to everything without us putting the work in, which I'm not saying we can't do, but I think our expectations of what we can get for consultant services for the amount of the grant is not as high as I had hoped, which is part of the reason I had hoped to work with the Regional Planning Commission.
Oh, and they said they don't have the capacity.
Well, they didn't rule it out, but I put in with a scope of work that I could get from a consultant. And, you know, if we get the project, it'll go out to bid. I'll have a further conversation with the RPC and see where they are at that time. So that was just, it was to be expected. I mean, these grants, and even with a contribution from the planning department's budget, you know, they're really the planning consultant community most of the time. So a couple of updates.
Can Dan?
Is it not 25? Is it not 25,000 anymore, or what is the?
No, it is 25,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's just
actually, I think it came in a little over.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So when it comes time for the RFP, we'll just be very deliberate about what we want our priorities to be.
Yep.
And be selective. Okay.
I agree. The Route 9 bike scoping.
Hi, Doran. I think we're all just waving.
Oh, hi, Doran. The Route 9 bike scoping study, we have a draft final document, which is going to be presented at Traffic Safety Committee on November 18th. That takes place at 8 in the morning. And then it'll likely be on the December 7th select board meeting. And this is the study that looks at putting bike lanes from Main Street up to exit 2 along High Street and Western Avenue. It appears, you know, they kind of have recommended a phased project for it. So the easier piece to accomplish would be the section from the Green Street intersection up to exit 2. And then, you know, a future phase could be the Main Street to Green Street, in part because it's pretty clear that some parking study would need to be done. There's a lot more on-street parking in that segment that trying to figure out and understand exactly the impact needs some more work. But that project will be closed out by the end of December. So look for some public meetings on that.
Okay.
The housing study is also wrapping up kind of quickly. I've been trying to schedule a steering committee meeting to look at the recommendations from the plan. And then once that's done, we're going to have a public meeting that's likely going to be at some point in November to get some community feedback on those recommendations. And then they'll make they'll finish up their report, and we'll do a select board presentation with that one as well.
So that was a big survey that we did out that. Oh, okay.
That was part of it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that public meeting will be publicly alerted,
publicly
noticed.
warned, and and it'll be a Zoom meeting. So so Dan, stay tuned. I'd be looking at the meeting date times tomorrow. And Doran, if you've been able to respond to, I haven't had a chance to look today, but I can say more, definitely in December.
Great. Oh, okay. And the bylaw modernization grant will go out, oh, tomorrow. That's going to be at the select board meeting, right? And they'll
Yes.
most likely approve it.
Yep.
It's on their consent agenda.
Yes, it is.
And just to sum up about the historic regs, not really to sum it up, but just a little update that if I understood correctly, that's not so much of a rush anymore because of that new sort of guidance or requirements at the state level you guys talked about last time. So it's like, it's still on our minds. We're still thinking about it. We can still revisit the documents and the regs and come up with things, but it's not, it's by necessity a little delayed.
That's correct.
So it's not on the agenda this meeting. Okay. Anything else? Any other announcements about stuff that's not on the agenda?
So I'm assuming the next meeting that you're having with select board, we're presenting anything with them in regards to the well, I was trying to find out and see what's going on with that traffic survey that I wanted to do.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know what happened with Colin. Still waiting to hear back from him for the information. So I didn't know if we can incorporate that as well into the
bike ped.
Yeah.
The bike ped
Cool.
master plan, part of the public outreach, we do have a survey in there. So yeah, I'm sure, we'll run it like the housing committee,
Okay.
the housing study, sorry. Where there will be a steering committee who will provide input. So,
Great.
yeah.
So yeah, this one was, I had to get back with him at some point. I don't know if you had some issues. So I just wanted to find out how far as with the traffic survey. He put it together, but I never got.
He put something together.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, because I was looking online to see if it was ever done
Yeah.
in Mollybrook. I can't find it this town or
Okay.
anyone has ever done
Right.
a traffic survey.
Well, it sounds like we've been approved, right, by the select board, and we're applying to you already applied to the state, and in the application is kind of a general thing about a safety survey.
Mhm.
And then if they accept, and many other things, and if they accept it, then we will create a targeted RFP for consultants. So,
Okay.
so it'd be good to know if Colin or others have already done one
Right, I could
before we
present
finalize that RFP. But if they haven't, then
Yeah,
it
because
seems
once I
like
get that, I could bring it to
Yeah.
the team's attention, and then we can get
absolutely.
that, going.
All right. Let's go on to the minutes for October 4th. People can suggest any edits or questions or typos or pressing changes, or just make a motion to approve them. And before we vote, we will do that.
Now, the SBA loans, I was just trying to get a recap on that. It says there.
Yeah.
That Dan has spoke about that. Dan, you spoke about the SBA loans, right?
Sure.
Is there anything else you wanted to expound on that, or?
Not really.
Okay.
It was as I think I tried to make clear, it's a bit of wishful thinking, really,
Right.
but
Okay.
we'll see. I haven't made any further progress on it for sure.
Yeah, it seemed promising, but I also don't know very much about it. So I liked how Steve had an interpretation and direction with it, but I didn't personally know where to go with it. But I'm all ears. All right. Is there a motion?
I motion
To
that
adopt
we
them?
approve the October 4th.
Okay. Is there a second? I'll second it.
Look at all those hands. Are you sure? Raise your hand if you're sure.
Any final issues about it? No, I don't think so. Okay, Prudence, you're voting aye. Let's see if we can get it unanimous, actually. Okay. That's Doran, Dan, Prudence, me, and Gary. Great. Ta-da. Okay, on to some of the meat of our meeting. This is about wrapping up the solar siting, the preferred solar siting subcommittee's work. I was on it, Doran was on it. Doran, if you ever want to jump in and say anything or take the words out of my mouth, please do, or add anything. let's see, we have three parts to this. One is reviewing, well, the document has three parts, and then at the end there's something related that the Conservation Commission created and separate from this work, and just submitted to us recently for consideration. But I won't go into it too much, because kind of the point of the document is for future or current planning commission or future planning commissions to be able to see this document and understand the situation. Preferred site requests for designation of proposed sites as preferred sites. So I hope you all read it, and the first two pages essentially are background material, context. Pages 3 and 4 are the criteria that we came up with. Well, we came up with all of this in essence, but the criteria is kind of mainly what we were asked to do by the December or January Planning Commission. And some of us thought that in the towards the beginning that we should make it like really binding, like does a quality of a certain site, if it has it or if it doesn't, then that means the planning commission is bound to, depending on which it is, approve it as a preferred site or not. But anyway, we couldn't come to agreement on the details or even if that was the right approach. So then we kind of have a looser, more guidance-y sort of criteria. The word shall is in there, which usually means binding, but it's shall consider. So, there's a lot of good things in here, these 11 subject matter criteria. But yeah, it can be interpreted mainly as guidance. And so I think this is though a huge, a big improvement based on last December when the Planning Commission was faced with the preferred site designation request, because staff did provide some background to us, but this provides a lot of other background and considerations, which they didn't. They really stuck to some of the real facts of our land use regs and town plan, but this goes a bit beyond that. And then the last part is some recommendations, which the Planning Commission didn't request from the subcommittee, but it seemed very relevant. And the recommendations can be applied, or they're for like implementation by either the Planning Commission or the Select Board or town departments, or all of the above. So that's that. What do you all think? Yep, Doran.
Yeah, I can just say that I just being part of the committee where I learned a lot. I was the self-proclaimed absolute, like the layman of the group. I was just surrounded by a lot of people that knew so much more about solar paneling and all the aspects of it than I. So it was very informative. I think what I like so much about the final document that we came up to is that it just makes it very straightforward, especially for planning commissioners that might not know also anything about solar. I think it's very important it makes it just very digestible and approachable. And so when future proposed sites come across the board, they get approved by the state, but there's something unique to the town of a location, say that that the state may have overlooked in terms of a particular spot. A lot of that information, it just gives some good guidelines and therefore future select board members to be able to kind of be like, yeah, well, actually, no, that site that they chose, even though it's approved by the state, is actually would not be good for X, Y, and Z. So that's kind of what I really loved getting out of that. I constantly did not know what everyone was talking about. I was constantly out of my depth, but it was good. I definitely learned a lot, and I think it's what we have is really of quality.
I missed about a fifth.
We missed a little bit, Doran. It was like the 30 seconds before your last sentence, but I don't know if you want to repeat it. We got
pretty much. I think what we have is of quality and will be very helpful, especially to people that may not, future select board members or commissioners that may not know much about solar.
Right. Okay. So Sue, did you want to say something?
Yeah,
Or Prudence,
Go
your
ahead,
hand just
Prudence,
went up.
I'll-
Yes, Prudence?
I just wanted to say that I thought the documents were very well-written and clear, and I know less than Dora, and I'm sure about it, but I felt like it was they were well-written, and I just agree that they'll be important to have for the next time we have a request.
Great. Oh, Gary.
Oh, it's gonna be quick. So I guess everybody's been watching the G3 summit with the solar. I'm really psyched to hope to see what Biden comes back with a package on, you
Yeah.
know, for as far as the solar. And I'm really psyched about this. Like I came in this as an empty bowl and I'm getting filled up now with all this information, and it's really good about the future. Not just for us, but in the next generation, like you said, passing out to the next planning commission, because
Yeah.
you know, this is really informative. So,
Yeah.
but I was
You're-
just looking at there was a set date and time when they're going to start really implementing it when they get back, as far as emissions and all this other stuff.
Yeah, well, one of the to respond to that, Ralph Mima was on our subcommittee, and he is a solar developer, and I'm pretty sure I'm remembering correctly when he said that in some ways this exercise we were doing is less relevant than it used to be,
Mhm.
at least at that time this year, because whatever the funding for solar isn't as good as it used to be, and
Right.
there's less, and so there's less projects than there was a little time ago. And this preferred site thing only started in 2017, so maybe it was, you know, a lot of active in the first year anyway. But like you're saying, this may become relevant again because, you know, different administrations have very different priorities and funding.
But when I look back, what is it, 2000, it was amazing, 2012, I found in the archives with Paul Cameron and
Oh.
how solar was introduced back then. But like you were saying, which pretty much validates, you know, it wasn't, the fundings were there, but it was slow growing.
Yeah.
But that's back in 2012, how this really just
Yeah.
started just ramping up, you know, now we're taking it more serious. It was a little hiccup, I guess, for a while.
Well, hopefully our document doesn't get lost to the archives.
Yeah. We don't want that.
Sue, did you want to?
I had a couple questions,
Yep.
just so that, you know, it might be something for the planning commission to consider. So on number 5, it says regardless of
Yes.
ownership, will development of the site result in a liquidation of the town's existing forest carbon storage inventory or a substantial impairment to the site's future capacity to sequester carbon? So I'm wondering, is there, you know, if you're losing forest carbon storage inventory, that is, you know, you're going to lose trees. So is this saying that if you need to clear that, you know, the project's out, or can you talk a little bit about how you think that is meant to be interpreted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you know, this came in a big part from you know, the Conservation Commission's representative, but of course we all agreed to it. And I think, you know, and I've heard Stephen Dotson, our sustainability coordinator, referring a bit to thinking it's a good idea to do, I believe he used the term or something like it, or the carbon storage inventory for the town. So this criteria may not mean that we have the capacity and the numbers right now to give answers to that. But I think it's written either for people to answer in their own minds subjectively, or maybe ideally when there is data for that, to answer it with that data. And I think the intent is that, you know, solar is mainly for, like, the benefit of that is for having less greenhouse gas emissions than fossil fuels, energy generation. But if, like, all things considered, the lifetime the comparison of that to the actual forest that's there and could be growing there is neutral or negative on the side of putting solar in, then that's a consideration, I think. Art is the expert on that, though, I think. So if he wants to chime in.
Far.
Oh, sorry, Far. Yeah.
Yeah, I could chime in. I mean, that's the general idea was, you know, we need to be doing more than simply replacing carbon intensive energy sources with renewables. We need to actually be taking carbon out of the air and sequestering it in the ground, or, you know, making sure that that what we have already in the ground or in the trees is staying there. So yeah, that's, you know, in light of the need to get beyond just net zero, but actually, you know, kind of reverse things. Like we need to be retaining the town's, you know, not just the town, but everyone's capacity to store and sequester carbon. And if, yeah, like maybe if maybe it could be, I kind of saw this as being part of, you know, this is just one of the criteria that's there, but and, you know, there are ways that I guess I didn't think of it as a sort of hard and fast rule. If you're like cutting down 3 trees for a huge solar project, you know, that's not a huge deal. But, you know, I don't know how. I guess I didn't have the sort of metric to measure, like, you know, what's an acceptable amount of forest carbon inventory or sequestration capacity to liquidate or denigrate. So, but, you know, that's, and I just guess I didn't see this as a sort of like hard and fast rule. It's just, you know, those things should be taken into consideration. And yeah, things that projects like the Exit 1 project or the one in New Hampshire that a lot of us have been hearing about would not under any circumstance, you know, pass muster with that sort of standard. It's not just cutting down 3 trees or you know, half a dozen trees or whatever. It's like a major liquidation of that forest carbon inventory and sequestration capacity. So I don't know if that, you know, needs to be reflected in some other way, but that was the motivation behind it.
Mhm. Any follow-up, Sue?
No, I just wanted to kind of put that out on the table for
Yeah,
the
everyone
planning
see.
commissioners to consider.
Yeah.
I see Dan has his hand
Right.
up.
Yeah, it could be interpreted like literally, and like Far was saying, that wasn't the intent. You know, 1 tree is, well, I don't know, I'd have to look up the exact definition of liquidation, but once again, you know, this isn't hard and fast criteria. It's thinking points,
Mhm.
maybe a little bit more than thinking points, but it's not. Future commissions aren't bound to it. Dan?
Yeah, I think it's good that Sue brought up that example, and there are others in your list which are all, you know, great questions to consider. But I guess my question about it is, you know, that especially with that question and a few others where there's a yes or no answer, right? So, you know, will development of the site result in liquidation, et cetera? Yes, but the question might be better worded in, you know, how much, or, you know, can it be calculated somehow what the impact would be? And that can be calculated. I mean, you know, some trees are better at sequestering carbon than others. For example, you know, there are all kinds of calculations that can be done. So anyway, I don't know if it is a criteria that shall consider, you know, that it doesn't sound like it's, you know, rhetorical questions. It sounds like it's that the criteria, you know, if you answered yes, then you wouldn't decide whether to provide a letter of support for the preferred site designation. Is that right? I mean, and
That's not the intent.
I'm just wondering really, but I guess it's, if you have a yes, no question like that, and the criteria aren't met. I mean, is it that 100% of these questions need to be answered favorably? Or is it, a certain percentage of them? I'm just asking, I really don't know where you're going with.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think I answered that. I don't think, I mean, that wasn't my impression when we adopted it. I mean, this also isn't just like, words we threw on a page that people can do whatever with. I mean, we did hope that these are the important things, and within the town scope, as you saw in the notes up above, we're avoiding redundancy with the state criteria. But I mean, Doran, will you chime in of what your impression was? But then also, I mean, and I want you to, but if we say our impression, I mean, maybe that doesn't matter, because this may be given to a whole new suite of commissioners in the future. So maybe that there is a point to reword it. But Doran, will you chime in?
Yeah, I would say that that really what it is it just gives more of a well-rounded picture for future commissioners to use to help guide them. You're right. It might not explain like, oh, well, 3 trees are going to get cut down there. Is that like is that fine, or is that too many? May depend on the different commissioners, or is it a whole acre of trees and what goes into that? And I think the goal really was to have this extremely truncated version that would just help future commissioners that may not know anything about solar help make decisions towards approval of. And also it still does to give a little bit of that is, obviously it's important that the community has a say in big solar projects coming into town. So just if it was against the best and benefit of like the local community, it was over a place that was, was really important in one way or another, they would help give guidance to either approve or deny that. So I think that was my take of its importance. It's, once again, you can totally read through it and then not use it at all, or it might just help with coming to a decision.
Yep.
I have another quick question that it may have a quick answer.
Okay.
In the the Kichi test, I forget where it is now. Can you explain that? Is it aesthetic? Something about the view or something? And does it have anything?
I don't know about that very well.
I'm not up to date on my Queechy test, but it is it's a court standard that they use on aesthetics. And so it's a 2-part test. And I think the first part, which I'm probably going to misspeak. So I'd love to come back and talk about the Queechy test, unless anybody else here.
I thought it was
interesting.
But
the first one is there an unreasonable impact? It's something along that line. So, is there an unreasonable it has to do with the impact. And then the other is the second part of it, does it offend an ordinary person?
Oh, the average sensibilities of it.
Yeah. And I can send you information on it. It's probably been well over 12 years since I've engaged with the Queechy test. It was big in the early 2000s because that's when the ruling came out, but I'm sorry.
no worries, just wondering.
I can't believe I'm misplacing where that is in the document.
It's actually, I just found it. It's the last bullet point under state project review details. First one is vernal pools.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, well, anyway, I mean, so that's something that the state reviews. And we came to the agreement in our subcommittee that we were going to try not to do any redundancy, even though there would be some benefits to it. Like maybe the state doesn't consider, impacts to wetlands to the same extent that maybe we care about them. But we decided, there's enough that we can consider on our own without that sort of technical redundancy. In some cases it's technical, in some it's not. But I know Gary wanted to speak earlier.
Yeah, it's gonna
And
be
then
a,
Prudence.
and anybody can chime in, like you, Tom, and everyone, the staff. This is this part where it says, will you have, if everyone have their paperwork with them in front of them?
Yeah, can
That
we
way-
hold off on the recommendations though, until the next part?
Well, it was just this one question right
Okay,
here,
all right.
where it says require new homes and office buildings to be wired for electric car charges. I guess the question I'm saying when I was listening even on what the G, are we there yet for electric cars and charges, being the corporations haven't quite gotten there yet of converting their cars from gas to electric? And what are your responses to that? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah, well, another thing that's kind of the, similarly, maybe the recommendations could be misinterpreted. We, you know, maybe, you know, the subcommittee would have liked for all of these things in the recommendations to become top priority and be immediately implemented to the extent they can. But I mean, that wasn't our intent. It was like, these are some relevant and for, you know, and good and applicable recommendations. And we hope that the planning commission considers them and applies them as they're relevant and appropriate. So this isn't, I mean, if, so the intent of the way the agenda's structured is that the only thing to adopt here really is potentially is the criteria, right? On pages 3 and 4. Pages 1 and 2 is just background material. So that's just, it's staff has it and they'll give it to future commissions, or they won't if we decide now that we hate it. But and then the recommendations is what we're going to talk about afterwards, and maybe which priorities we want to focus on.
Well, you're definitely in the right direction. This is where we're heading. We're
Yeah.
trying to push towards the electric cars somewhere. I'm just wondering if I'll be around for that, like Jetsons or they're looking at 2050. They haven't even wanted, and I was watching, I said, this is definitely a good thing, but are we there yet? Is the question for people. Because like I said,
Yeah.
I look at all the charges now around, look at price.
Right. Yeah, maybe
I'm
not.
just trying to see if it's something that we want to keep.
Right.
And somewhere down the road, the next generation to be considered for electric
Sure.
charges, once that's all automotive and auto businesses have converted their cars from emission to electric. Because I was watching something, they're not even, they're projecting in the future,
Right.
but that is part of the plan.
So it sounds like your feeling on that is to hold off a little bit, or
Yeah,
do
I
a better
mean,
assessment.
We're putting out a lot of charges, and I look around and I don't see too many electric cars
Yeah, not yet.
out there right now as we speak. You might get a few out of towns with Teslas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I go by all the electric stations and check how many people charge their cars. That might be a little weird, but I
Well,
was
let's,
wondering.
yeah, well, we'll keep that in mind when we get to the recommendations. Let's see if we can get through the criteria, because we're already a
Oh, sorry
little bit
about that.
behind. No, it's all right. Easy to, I'm glad you're excited about the
I'm
document.
sorry.
Prudence, yep.
I guess I also question the recommendation, criteria number 5, with the word liquidization of the town's existing forest carbon storage inventory. I mean, my thought of that word is that it means kind of elimination. And so I wonder if we'd be better off saying a substantial reduction or something like that.
Okay. I mean, I'm saying okay in my personal opinion. Yeah, so I'm also feeling like we can, if we want to adopt this as is, we can. If we want to adopt it with minor edits that we can make now, then we can. But if we want to make some significant edits, then we'll have to take it home and do it again. So, I mean, what do people feel about that rewording? Can we just do like a thumbs up or thumbs down?
Well, is there like
Or
an
more
urgency to have this
No,
drafted right away, or?
no, I don't think there is,
redrafted?
but
I mean, could we just take it home and I guess people could just, 'cause I'm just looking at what it is now that we're focusing on, and what's obtainable, what's practical, what could be done, and what's for the future, and this kind of like restructure, maybe rephrase certain things.
but that's the recommendations, and the criteria
Right.
is
Yeah,
the
page
page
3
beyond
is
that.
the criteria.
page 3, it shows on the bottom right. Still, yeah, there's a lot here, and so
Yeah,
I hope
there's a
we all
lot to
reviewed.
take in, to digest, and really just say, yes, we'll do it. And we didn't really take in as much as we should have. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe me and Doran are, coming from a different vantage point because we've definitely reviewed this very thoroughly, but for some of you, it's
Right.
first time, right?
Yeah.
Since Friday when it's in the folder.
It's been in the folder longer.
Oh yeah, longer than that. Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
put it in last month.
Yeah.
But yeah, but we didn't have it. I mean, that we can definitely table things and then bring them up another time,
Yeah, if it pleases the court,
I guess.
we can do that.
I think it would be good to talk through any concerns. I also want to respect that a subcommittee came together to do this work and not,
Right.
put it off too long, but
Right.
Did you want to set a deadline, I guess?
Well, let's hear from Prudence, maybe
I
about
mean,
that.
I'd be ready to vote on it. The subcommittee spent a fair amount of time, knocking it around. I don't know how people feel. It seems like that number 5 might be the one that caused some question. And I don't know if that's,
Yeah. Well, regarding just number 5 there, how do people feel about Prudence's suggestion to change liquidation to substantial reduction?
or something, yeah. Something so that we wouldn't have like, cutting down 5 trees eliminates a project.
Well, the word, in the second sentence clause, it says substantial impairment, so substantial. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, substantial. I mean, maybe the word impairment again. I don't know. Well, it's inventory. I mean, once again, this isn't like, this isn't, judicial,
Mhm.
I don't know, this isn't statute or something or case law. So I think people can, and these are all, they're supposed to be thinking points. And maybe to that point, Dan, about where it says shall consider, maybe you think that should be reworded, like is invited to consider.
Yeah, it is a bit, I mean, understood, it's not, gonna be on the legal books or anything, but it does have the tone of being conditional, of course, criteria, and you can interpret these however you like, which is a good thing.
Yep.
But it could be a bit like that shall consider, and I guess I'll come back to my earlier question, is it intended that 100% of these, are supposed to be favorable answers in order to pass
No.
the criteria, or
No.
is it
Just all, I think Dorn said it well earlier. He said to give a more well-rounded
Sure, no, absolutely. And it's
conception. So
no, it's a great job, on the work,
Yeah.
on the document, yeah.
FAR was
Although, can I,
on the sub. Oh yeah, go ahead. Oh, Dan, go ahead.
it's similar to the carbon sequestration question in number 8, which I think I get where this is, where the two questions in number 8 are going, but there's one in particular, I get, I understand the issues involved in the list there. But one that in particular that you might consider being more specific about is change in property value. Do you see where I mean right in the middle of number 8?
Yes.
Because change could be positive or negative, and I guess either one could be a big concern, of course, and so I guess change could be appropriate,
Right.
but it's a big laundry list there, which is great. I'm not, but there's sort of, it's bookended by these two questions about, the surrounding neighborhood, community at large, and then trails. I'm just not sure that one is, gonna be as specific, but then again, it doesn't, I guess it doesn't, need to be specific, but I guess, but the specific thing about change in property value might be something that, might be, you could say, impact on, property, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's it's just the one that jumped out at me.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think again, it's a thinking point. So for some people, if they interpret that this is going to decrease property value, then that may make them not want to make it a preferred site. For others, they may see that as well, but not care. Others may see a benefit and care. Others may see a benefit and not care. And it's just,
Yeah, they're just guidance questions. Yeah.
yeah,
I guess that gets back to the shall consider question. I don't know how to reword that. Maybe it would be,
Oh.
it might be good
Well,
to
how,
come up with a different
yeah.
way of putting it.
Yeah, but what about just the designated town bodies, as it says then in parentheses, is invited to consider each of the following criteria. I think I got that from Nonviolent Communication for Dummies.
I feel like that waters it down.
Yeah.
Like this work was put in and this committee made these recommendations that these are important aspects to evaluate in a project.
Yeah,
I kind of don't like that it's invited to, because it just feels like these are important. These are what town people felt were important to be considered. And
Yeah.
you can weigh it in lots of different ways, but
mm.
we want you to look at these things.
Well, 6 and 7, I was just wondering, according to the sensibilities of the average person.
Yeah.
That means,
That term has some basis. Ralph knew a lot about it, and I think Stephen Dotson chimed in too. It's actually some kind of legal term that's, it seems really kind of vague, but it actually, it's been tested to have some basis in, I guess yeah, that's all I can say.
okay. I was just looking at this.
It seems kind of harmless to me, so.
Yeah.
Can we hem out the shall consider aspect?
Did we want to hear from?
Oh, yeah, Far, your hand's been up for a bit. Far.
Sorry, just unmuting. Thanks. Yeah, on both those issues, the number 5 and the shall consider, I'm kind of on, just as a member of the public, on Sue's side about I would prefer to see a stricter application of these criteria, and I do understand that liquidation can be a sort of prohibitive standard to apply. I'm somewhat concerned about the mushiness of substantial reduction. It would be nice if we had like a little more solid definition, but I think lacking one at the moment, I think that's fine, and I would be amenable to that as one of the main pushers for that criterion. Sorry. But yeah, that's my input on those two things.
I wonder if we didn't make any changes, if people are willing to give a thumbs up, thumbs down about if they would be willing to adopt this as is.
Can I throw one more?
Yep.
In 11,
Oh.
Is the proposed site where the town would prefer to see solar projects or, oh, sorry. Is the proposed site where the town would prefer to see solar projects, or is it merely an acceptable site? This one makes me uncomfortable, and I think it's probably because I'm coming from the land use regulatory. This seems very arbitrary to me. It's the one where somebody can come in and say, I really always wanted a pool there. I don't know, maybe it's a little fantastical, but I feel like there are processes set up to say, these are the places that we want preferred site, and these are the places that we don't.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in the recommendations. I feel uncomfortable about this one. It just seems like it's the catch-all that, could allow in the NIMBY, I don't know. Just throwing that out there for your consideration.
Right. I'll let Doran, I see his hand up, and then I'll speak to it.
I was just going to say, when we chatted about that a bit, the thing is like there would really have to be a very substantial, something in the catch-all that all of a sudden someone would bring up for it to be obviously like for it to be kind of the thing with which a solar panel would be denied or shut down. It could be a thing that like actually this is a relatively important historical place that's not considered a historical place. Blah, blah. It could be like along that line. I think the kind of the leaving that was to be able to provide there could be some other piece of information that could arise, but the chances of that then being something that would be agreed upon as a reason to vote down a solar panel or like a solar project seems pretty unlikely. I think that was kind of but leaving it there because there just may be something else that was not seen. Maybe it was like an important spot that someone who passed away in town would like sit, and there was like the desire to put a bench. I don't know, I don't know, but I think that's why it was that catch-all was kept there.
I feel like 10 could do that, and I guess it's the idea that I don't know, the very American ideal that people have a right to do with their property, those things that are acceptable and within regulations, and this one just doesn't. It feels a little boundless to me still, but it's the Planning Commission's criteria.
Which one feels boundless? You're saying 11 or 10?
11.
Okay, yeah.
Like I see 10, okay, all of a sudden, if we figure out that this is an important burial ground or, some historic site, I see that as being the one that maybe gives that interpretation, but the wording of 11 is.
Yeah, well, I'll speak to it a little bit. I came up with and mainly that and put it in. The thinking there is kind of, I don't know if we could call it like a meta criteria or criterion or something. It's like, it's not at the same level as the others. It's like regarding the actual preferred site program and the interpretation of it and the structure. So I think maybe some people, I don't have a ton of experience in this. I've seen, several determinations in the Wyndham Project Review Committee of the Wyndham Regional Commission. And I know, the greatest crisis we have, ever is happening now, with climate change. But it seems like some mindsets are that we need solar so much that just anywhere where it's acceptable, we're going to give preferred site status to. And so what I was trying to do here is say, personally, I'm all for tons of incentives and and the encouragement for solar, but I like the fact that there's at least one program that is, I interpret to steer it in ideal direction and in certain sites. So it's just trying to frame, keep it in people's minds that this shouldn't be applied just to every solar designation that comes up. If we disagree with that, we can remove it, but it's like a reminder. Dan.
Yeah, I'm sure you considered this, and just stop me if it seems off base, but I think the shall consider being connected to criteria is kind of getting back to that question, is kind of the sticking point, because I'm not sure if these are criteria or if they are questions that might lead to criteria, because especially given, in the future, things might change, you might have a quick and easy way to use satellite data or something like that. I'm not sure what it might be, but as an alternative, just want to put this out there to keep it with teeth, but also inspire a discussion, which it seems like what you're trying to do with these questions. Is that kind of right? You're trying to get the Planning Commission to think about these questions, right?
I think so, but there's two other people on the subcommittee. You guys want to give thumbs up, thumbs down, or clarify?
Yeah.
Far?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was actually trying to find the document and finally just found it. So I missed the question. What was?
Well, essentially, you're trying to inspire or encourage a discussion, right? And to possibly that I'm not sure if these questions, the answers to these questions would be criteria. And I know that that's open to discussion, but just as an alternative, I just want to put these ideas out there. What it seems like you're trying to do is that you might say that the planning commission should consider and account for and investigate answers to these questions, right? So you're trying to investigate. You may not have clear-cut answers to some of these questions, but you're trying to get everyone to consider in a specific way what the criteria for a project should be, I think. And I know that might take you can still call it criteria. I'm just, it's sort of like a co-construction of the criteria. If you were to encourage or, essentially use these questions to guide the criteria creation.
Yeah, I think my the process of coming up with this document was, there was a lot of back and forth, and we went through a number of very different kind of rubrics that had very different approach. They had that sort of approach, which is more sort of advisory questions you might ask, and other ones that were much more sort of cut and dry, yes and no questions, or quantifiable questions. And so I think we ultimately landed with this document that has a little bit of both, and maybe that's a little imperfect. But I feel like the criteria that are listed there, the ones that don't have a clear yes or no question, it seems to me are clearly just sort of to inspire the conversation.
Right.
And the ones that do should be, evaluated on that basis. I don't know if that makes sense as a guiding document, but that's kind of how I look at it.
I wish I could look to someone in charge to decide if we should reword or keep it the way it is. Oh, wait. So what did you think, Far, of Dan's rewording suggestions?
Was this
If you remember,
introductory part, or
it was for the, yeah,
I
Dan.
can tell you what I said if you want. I know this is even more mealy-mouthed and whatever, but should consider might be just a little easier to go down. I do like the idea of account for or sort of investigate these questions.
Okay, so in deciding whether to provide a letter of support for preferred site designation, the designated town bodies, typically select board and or planning commission, should account for each of the following criteria, or should investigate.
Should consider
Should consider.
Should consider would
and
be
account
also.
for or investigate answers to these questions.
All of those three verbs.
Put all three in.
Okay.
Well, I think it could be account for or investigate.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't have to be both.
Should consider and investigate each of the following criteria.
I think Dan's saying he
Oh,
doesn't
sorry.
view it as criteria.
Oh,
Sorry, Dan.
No,
shouldn't
that's,
speak for
you can, as I was saying, you can still call it criteria. That's,
Okay.
but I guess it would be good to have a broader sort of instructive verb in there that says something like, these are all different questions. They're not even all considerations so much as they are things that you might be able to investigate or account for. You know what I mean? Those are the best things I could come up with anyway. There might be other good ones, but because you're trying to, in some cases you might want to get a number and say, oh, is that high or is that low? Or in some cases it's a perspective or the average person sees it as, interprets the landscape differently. There are different things that you're getting out of those questions.
Okay. Should consider and account for each of the following criteria. Okay, and back down to the liquidation thing. I mean, one dictionary says eliminate, typically by violent means, kill. So the eliminate word, I mean, that does seem a little strong to me. Like, no solar project is going to eliminate the forced carbon inventory of the town. Right? So, I mean, I'm leaning towards substantial reduction. I don't mean to take the power out of it, but I think in the sense of, consulting the dictionary and coming to an agreement, maybe. Can we do that? Okay.
Can I? Sorry,
Yep.
I was just gonna say, yeah. So I guess my suggestion, I think we should say we vote to adopt this with the ability to make minor alterations. Just like, once again, the shift of that word, so on and so forth, and a couple of others feels like the route that we should go down, as opposed to we're not talking about making such drastic alterations that it would need to be sat on. But that's at least what I'm hearing.
Okay. I think that's a good way to go. And we're behind time. We can always table things, either, this or parts of it or other things on the agenda. But I think that, what do you guys think about a motion to adopt the criteria with those two little edits made, with the understanding that future planning commissions can make minor edits? I mean, they can also just throw it away. They can also just throw it away, but
they could stop using it.
yeah. Well,
yeah.
I guess that doesn't have to be said in the motion then. It can just be, okay, adopted with those minor edits. Can we do that?
Yep, I would second.
Okay, that's the motion. Doran seconded.
Yeah.
The two people of the committee on the commission made that motion. Great.
Who made it?
I
Sorry.
did. And Doran seconded. Okay,
Okay.
let's start with Dan.
Aye.
And Gary.
Aye.
Prudence
Aye.
and Doran. And myself, aye. Okay, on to the recommendations.
What is this one?
Oh, no, I mean, still for the same
No, we're still
document,
on.
the
Oh.
same document.
Now we're on page 5.
Yeah,
Where
page-
you were
Yeah,
half an hour
page
ago.
5 and 6, it has all those bolded.
That is the curve, I guess.
Yeah, so a little, all of these recommendations are relevant ones. I think we all in common, early on knew that we wanted to, we want more solar. That's the way the subcommittee felt. And we felt like, instead of just focusing on the criteria, we could branch out a little bit. And in all of our considerations, we came across some other ways to further, well, not that the preferred site, anyway, to further solar in the town. And so some of these are directly for the planning commission to work on if they so choose. And some of them are for the planning commission to recommend to the select board if they so choose, or town departments if they so choose.
Or other committees.
Or other committees, yep. And you'll see at the very end, there's like three that, and it's in no order of importance. The last 3 are just made up of all bolds and underlined without any like non-bold and non-underlined description. That was just because we were wordsmithing in our last meeting, and we feel not necessarily, maybe just as strongly as these as others, but there wasn't as much time to kind of flesh them out a little bit like the others. So I don't know, there's 2 or 3 that really jump out at me that I think are a good combination of actionable and would have effect. But I guess we don't need to decide anything now, but how about we just say what jumped out at us as what we think the planning commission should advance?
Oh, advance, okay.
Yeah, in whatever way is appropriate.
Well, I guess I already jumped the gun with the car issue.
Yeah, well, so is that a question that you had about it, or
Yeah,
that's something that you're excited to do? If
Well, I
it's,
was just kind of concerned because I like,
Yeah.
listening and doing studies about where we're at now with electric cars.
right,
with the car chargers, requiring new homes and office buildings to be wired for that. I thought, looking at right now where we're at, timing wise and otherwise, are we
Right.
there yet for electric cars where we're going
So-
to need these houses already lit for electric chargers?
I don't know enough, and I could do the research and get back to you. I mean, I don't know, the residential energy code and some of that stuff
Yeah.
actually in the building codes may require certain, at least amps for the connections. I'm not really sure on that. What I can say is our existing land use regulations, if you've got more than 40 parking spaces, we do require electric chargers. So you are seeing more in town. I mean, I go by the Tesla ones and some days I'm surprised by how many people are parked there.
Yeah,
How many, and that, yeah, sure, that's primarily a traveling public. But equally, I'm in the High Grove lot and there's plenty of people using those as well.
Yeah.
So, we've been at this for at least 5 years and I'm actually now starting to see more use of them. So
Yeah, I
that gives
mean-
me hope.
I think because now also when we had the surge of people during the summer, the people moving in, I was just doing like I said, independent study at each places that have EV setups by schools,
Yep.
hospital, places like that we have implemented EVs, not just for cars, but for bicycles.
Yep.
And how often they use even by Burger King, I was by Irving up that way, just to see how often people just sat to drink a coffee. How many people go there to use this on a daily basis? And is this something that we are, just surveying?
Right.
Like with the signs?
So do you feel strongly about figuring out if that's worthwhile in implementing it, or you just feel unsure about what to do with that one?
Right now,
Because there's probably a bunch that we feel strongly to start moving on. So I'd like to focus on those.
I would.
Okay.
Can I make a comment as staff just to
Yeah.
frame the conversation?
Oh, thank you.
I do sort of have a bit of worry about recommending any land use changes that might add cost to the supply side aspect of housing, given a lot of the recommendations that have come out of the housing study
Yeah.
or are soon to be available to the public that are coming out of the housing study, as well as sort of just anything that promotes the idea of private decentralized transport, that's generative of land use patterns that are not exactly in line with our stated planning goals, which that is a lot less of a major concern than the idea of adding costs to housing construction. But the idea that cars, even when electric, are still generative of a landscape that is car dominated, might be interesting for consideration.
Yeah. My thought on that specific one is, now doesn't seem to be the right time. The most, ideal time to advance that requirement for the reasons you said. Upon houses and things. And similarly, I had the idea of, requiring, there's some, solar PV to be on the roofs of a certain level, or size of new construction or major renovations. And it's arguable, like, is that a building code thing or is that potentially a land use thing? And, I see a lot of land use regs that we have that are very specific upon, the lighting or the design or the bays or a porch or the internal appliances of a SRO. So, if those can go through, then I think solar PV is on a roof code, but we're also not at a time in town where we have, a booming supply side of, of offices and manufacturing and retail and employers and stuff. So it's like, doesn't necessarily seem like the best time to put, another requirement, on costs on the supply side, like you said. But I've,
Sorry, I did also mean to flag that without local building inspection, it's unlikely that this is something that we could feasibly implement as well, given that single family homes are in everywhere that you can build residential. I believe they are permitted use by state statute. So we don't do local building inspections, so we couldn't really get in and make sure that that's happening without
The
making
solar
it-
PV on the roof or the electric
just
chargers.
any of these.
Oh, right.
The elect-
building
both.
code.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, my thought when I kind of spearheaded putting that in was like, flat rooftops over 5,000 square feet or something, huge ones like the CNS building, not to name names or other ones. I just saw Saxon's River Distilleries putting us 150 kilowatts on their roof. Anyway,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, Dan's hands up. But yeah, can we focus on things that we're excited about? And we don't have to make any decisions. I just want to run through this real quick and then move on to the Conservation Commission's resolution. But Dan, your hand was up.
Yeah, it goes with what you were just saying. I would be excited about let's see, the second major set of recommendations here, the create parcel specific maps of preferred sites. And this might get into what the staff are already doing and what the planning commission is already doing, or planning or hoping to do. But it might be worthwhile. I mean, by the way, are we going to vote on this one, on the recommendations? Is that the intention?
No. I mean, I think, my goal would be at some point we decide which, if any, are our priorities, and we do integrate them into our work. But we're behind, so I just want people to express a little excitement right now.
Mapping ones. That sounds very
Okay.
project based. Project oriented. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we go around if anyone has anything else, and then we'll bring this up at another meeting.
I like to develop preferred site designation guidance for wind, biomass, hydro, and methane.
Yeah.
I mean, on the agricultural committee, Sue, I think this is
Has that come up much? Is there much,
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, it hasn't really come up, people requesting preferred site
Yeah.
guidance, or designation for wind, biomass, hydro. You would think, because we have
Yeah.
all three of those here, but it just hasn't come up even
Wow.
to, 1% of what the
Mhm.
solar has. That may be an exaggeration, but. A couple things for me was that, the town's talking a lot about a stormwater utility. And I thought that to incentivize solar, maybe, I don't know how it's done with stormwater utilities, except that I did just search today in 3 Vermont towns' stormwater utility ordinances, Williston, Colchester, and St. Albans. I searched for solar, for renewable, for energy, and there was no, control F, and there was no results. So my thinking is that it's the third bold point there on the recommendations. Well, and then the first one of the main two within it, that solar being impervious, though renewable energy, if it's on an impervious surface, it should to some degree negate that impervious surface. Because the way the stormwater utility is going to work in general is that an impervious surfaces are taxed, billed, because they're impervious, and the water doesn't absorb into dirt, into soil or whatnot. But if the solar being renewable but being impervious is on a pervious surface, being that dirt or meadow or field or forest, then it will be treated just like an impervious surface. So anyway, that's one thing I'm excited about, to kind of use the municipal stormwater utility structure that the select board's going to decide on, to find a little plug or a little benefit for solar panels when they're appropriately cited, in my mind. And then the other thing was that the state allows municipalities, just like at town meeting, some town meetings where we vote to exempt properties, usually they're nonprofits of one sort or another. The state also allows us to exempt or stabilize the property taxes of certain classes of solar installations. And so going along with the preferred siting theme, my thought is, I wonder if that vote has to be all solar in town, or if it can be like this solar site, which is on disturbed or degraded land or building.
Mhm.
But not this solar site, that's just on prime ag soil. We're not even going to consider that. So I don't know if we need legal interpretation for that or not, but. And then, oh yeah. And then to bring us in, since we're behind and I don't want to stop taking up too much time, to lead us into the Conservation Commission's resolution that they shared with us and want us to consider. The subcommittee, the second to last recommendation is that recommending that future planning commissions, when considering preferred site designation requests, actively solicit input from our neighboring town bodies that are relevant, like the Conservation Commission, Energy Committee, and Ag Committee. Get them involved actively from these meetings are open to everyone, but to actually let them know
What's the
and invite them.
cooperative thing you're looking for? To cooperate?
Yep. Instead of just the planning commission deciding. So, but anyway, these are,
I agree with that one. I mean, this was kind of a bumpy ride as we went through the exit one, where, we hadn't had one in a while in the department. So I think even just for our own operating procedures, I'm going to put together some sort of document with kind of the steps and when, what it means, how the town needs to interact and that kind of thing. So I can definitely include
as like protocol. Great. Can we move on to the Conservation Commission's resolution or any? Okay. Great. So I hope you all saw that and read that in advance. If FAR wants to, being a member or chair of the Conservation Commission, wants to say or present or summarize anything or frame this in any way that's not self-evident by reading it, please do so. But we can also just ask questions or brainstorm, but FAR, I'll give you the chance first.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Tom. So this resolution actually first, it had a few more therefores initially, while the exit one PUC case was still open. Actually asking the select board and the planning commission to rescind their whatever recommendation based on these criteria that we came up with. But that process is now closed. They've gotten their certificate of public good. So that project is, as far as I know, is now cleared to go forward, assuming they get their wetland permits, which it sounds like they probably will. So a lot of these sort of whereases were kind of going in that direction, and the therefore changed to a much narrower therefore actually just asking the planning commission reconsider industrial zoning for forested sites, because that seemed to be one of the main sort of avenues by which the exit one project got designated as a preferred site, because it was zoned as industrial, even though it wasn't didn't currently have an industrial or historically have an industrial use. So yeah, on the Conservation Commission wanted to ask the Planning Commission to reconsider any other sites like this that are zoned industrial but are nevertheless forested currently, and in light of this stuff about forest carbon storage and sequestration, we'd like to keep them that way so that we can hopefully meet and exceed some of our carbon targets. Yeah, so that's kind of that's what informs this resolution and this request.
Okay. Does anyone want to ask questions or offer a perspective or something? I'll start off framing it maybe a little bit and say that I think, technically that this solar project that they're doing you know, that spurred all this. It's exempt from our permitting, from our land use regs, but through the state's preferred site thing, program is how it came to us and came to our table to consider, but not through the zoning, not through the permitting, just through that. But then we did kind of consider our zoning, because that's a document that we have. And in the industrial zoning, it says that utility facilities are allowed. They're actually allowed, I think, in every single zone. But in somewhere else in the zoning, there's another sort of facility called energy generation facility. But that's never in any of the use tables of any of the zones. So, and I think because those are almost always exempt from permitting. But to the extent that we are consulting the zoning unofficially through preferred site designation requests, maybe we should, just as a matter of, for that sole purpose, unofficially, maybe we should figure out where to put in the tables by zone permitted or conditional energy generation facilities. Even though they won't hold any weight as far as the permitting, they will hold weight unofficially in our future preferred site considerations. And then through that process, we can decide, should we put them in industrial? Should we put them in waterfront? Should we put them in, because they're there in the zoning, energy generation facilities, but then as they're like defined, but then they're not,
I think
they're not
because
applied
they're a
anywhere.
state protected.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see this question coming.
Yeah.
I need to do some research, but if I recall, that is a state defined term and possibly regulated in site planning. There might only be certain criteria. I need to look into
Yeah.
that some more. I hear what you're saying.
Mhm.
Or I hear what you're suggesting is,
Right.
I just can't tell you off the top of my head that we can do that.
Mhm. So the request is to consider reevaluating other industrial zone parcels that currently represent part of forest carbon industry, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, it was done unofficially, so in that sense, so I was trying to propose a way that I don't need to repeat myself. We could have put something like that into the criteria, something about industrial zones. In my perspective, that parcel was bothersome for me as far as being a preferred site, because it was fully forested, and because I saw in a bunch of the town and regional documents that industrial sites being so limited and for industry and solar may not be appropriate because it doesn't provide nearly the same degree of like economic benefit and jobs and tax base. So just seemed, so it was those two reasons for me. But for other people, it seemed like solar really fits with industrial. Dan.
Yeah, I have a question specifically about the third whereas. So it is the intent to basically create like a joint commission between the Energy Committee, Conservation Commission, Agricultural Committee, and Planning? Because if that's I mean, if that wording is accurate, that may be a good thing to push for. If that's, specifically when you're considering zoning, considering zoning of solar projects. Is that the intent? Or is it just that so just to be clear, or is it to we need to consider the input of all those commissions, and then we still make the decision. Do you know what I mean?
And it's for future preferred site designation requests,
I-
right, Far? And, oh, sorry, what?
Can if I can,
Oh, okay.
but Far unmuted, so if you want to go Far, you should go.
Oh, yeah, either one of us. I mean, the
Go ahead.
the resolved was all about industrial zoning, and it sounded like per the previous item and the recommendations about bringing in other commissions and committees into the solar siting designation process, like however that's done, like it doesn't need to be a formal thing, but whatever it sounds like Sue has that kind of like in mind, and it will probably happen in the future, and that's fine and not part of what was being considered in this resolution. It was just sort of like part of the background that like that's why it's a whereas and not a therefore.
Okay.
Yeah. And to Far's point early on, there was much more to this resolution in its first iteration. And so it was kind of laying out the background, and it came with a proposal to have the planning commission and the select board try to rescind their preferred solar site status on this particular parcel. What it boils down to is kind of a request for the planning commission to look at the industrial zoning district, particularly those that are forested. In 2015, the choice was made. We needed some larger parcels for potential development, because most of the parcels that we had were small and couldn't accommodate a business that might have some larger impacts. We did look in these Canal Street areas, and now there seems to be some sentiment that maybe they're not appropriate. So it's really just a request to kind of reconsider, look at the industrial zoning district. Does it match up to, our current values, and consider some changes if appropriate. Not create a new kind of joint committee or something like that. I think Art has his hand up again.
Oh, you do, Far?
Yeah, my hand was up previously for a different issue, sort of a little bit more background. In the Conservation Commission's discussion of this resolution, there was a little bit of discussion about whether, to what extent it's possible to change the zoning on just part of a parcel, so that a parcel that is largely forested, for instance, Omega Optical, but has obviously should be industrial zoned. That's its current use. Whether that can be whether the zoning can be split, but or the zoning on the parcel can be split based on different use and different.
I think it can be, right?
Yeah.
That is done. Yes.
We tried not to,
Okay.
but it can be done.
Mhm.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, Gary.
one question, are you, where's this Far? I can't see him, okay.
Yeah.
Far, I don't know if you can hear me, I guess you can. Are you in collaborative with the Tree Advisory Committee too, with a lot of the deforestations and all that? You collaborate, would you want to have you thought about collaborating alongside with them, or is that a part of something you might consider? Or is this conservation and energy?
I would definitely consider it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I was under the impression that the tree committee was more about the urban, like sort of street trees and so forth, and less about the management of forest land as a forest. So that
That's correct.
That's the sort of focus of the Conservation Commission, is sort of landscape scale, what's happening
Right.
in the forests.
Far, I feel like I'm having a dawning realization. So this last part, the therefore, the resolved paragraph, the Conservation Commission is proposing that we consider the forested industrial zones. We consider changing their zoning to something more protective. Is that literally what the request is? It's not necessarily even talking specifically about future preferred site processes. It's talking about the, oh, okay.
Correct.
What should we say? Duly noted and move on?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, I don't mean to be short about it, but I think, you know, we all read it and we've talked about it and we can bring it up again, but we're behind. And it's, I don't know what the actionable is right now. So is that fair, Far? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know what the actionable is either. It sounds, I think maybe Sue, you mentioned that zoning kind of gets reconsidered on a regular basis, and maybe something was happening sometime soon. And
Yeah, I think we're looking, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
just yeah, if that's the sort of upcoming process already, I'm fine with, you know, y'all not taking any action and just saying duly noted at the moment.
Right.
So I think we do, you know, we are looking at zoning changes. This is not something that was on the list. Doesn't mean it can't be.
Right.
I think the planning commission's plate is pretty full, as is staff. So maybe the conservation commission can help feed some information that would be useful in this process. I think that could be a nice request for the planning commission to make of the conservation commission. Steve and I sitting here,
Right.
staff both. So,
Yeah.
you know, maybe it's a project that we work through. We look at, you know, we've done a little bit of preliminary carbon sequestration, you know, back of the notebook numbers. We could look at what are the resources on these sites. I mean, there are not a ton of forested industrial areas left, but there are parts of parcels for sure. So I don't think this is a heavy lift. To kind of look at the assets on the site, the natural resource assets, and potential carbon sequestration values. And maybe that's something the conservation can share with the planning commission, and we spend some time at a meeting
Right.
taking a look at it.
Okay. How about we invite the Conservation Commission to come up with a proposal, like a map, I guess, or a change of the zoning in alignment with their request here. And we'll consider it at a future meeting. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that need to be an official motion, or it's just a request
Good question.
to the chair of the conservation? Okay, you heard that Far, right? And it's in our minutes. And my wonderful speaking is there on BCTV for the recording. Great.
Thank you for clearing that up about the tree advisory committee. I've just been educated.
Yeah. Gosh, so we only have 20 minutes
Yeah.
left, unless we
that.
want to go over.
Cannabis.
But neither of these things are pressing. What do people think? What do we want to do? Go over, select one or the other? What?
This is about the cannabis, commercial cannabis, right?
Well, so we have the commercial cannabis item and the infill housing study, the in-house project that we wanted to start working on.
I like the cannabis.
I thought you liked site surveys though.
I like both.
Okay.
You can both. If you can slim it down to,
Can one of them fit in 20 minutes better than the other?
I think the cannabis could
Yeah, is that,
slim me down a little bit. What do you think? I mean,
Do you think we can? Yeah.
I'm happy to push off on cannabis if housing is more pressing. The cannabis, we still have, 11 months until the date of sale, so.
I think with cannabis, we keep hoping that we're going to get more information from the state level.
Yeah.
right.
So, we could probably push it off to December. I at least want to have a conversation and a kind of, how are we going to move forward, getting public input? And I think the position that we're coming from as staff is, let's look at it under our existing zoning. If you've read the memo, Steve wrote a really comprehensive
That's excellent.
memo. He's done some excellent research.
Yes, he has.
But it could probably sit for another month, and let us, maybe
Absolutely.
we'll have some more guidance from the state at that point.
Yeah, because they're still meeting, if I'm not mistaken, the
They
cannabis
are.
boards. I've been watching it
Yeah.
on BCT. There's so much
know.
regulations and things.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think
I suppose I could do a 1-minute elevator pitch for
Sure.
what folks could, if anyone hasn't read the
Okay.
memo or looked at the other document that I put in there for sort of a lookbook of existing dispensaries in Western Mass. The idea here was to consider the approaches that have been taken in other places that did not benefit from as much hindsight as we will be able to. And I do think that will likely be preempted by the state in lots of ways that sort of tie our hands. But mostly we in the staff, or maybe I should just speak for myself, wanted to really caution against implementing zoning tools that are not necessarily based in empirical data and are more feelings driven, because it has real impacts on land use as well as our tax base and our available retail real estate. I don't think this printed well, but there's a map on the back of the memo that shows under a former zoning designation, how much of our retail would be eliminated from consideration if we buffered by 1,000 feet around daycares and schools, for example, which is a fairly common elsewhere zoning tool that's been used for cannabis. So essentially the punchline is just that we should make sure, especially because the murkiness of the legal situation around cannabis, that the zoning tools we consider should be proportional to any impacts of the use, just like we would in anything else that might be less controversial with some segments of the population.
I gotta agree, because they were speaking on marginalizations in different areas too, if I'm not mistaken. Was watching it on TV, and is there any way, I don't know, Sue, someone can come in to maybe, I don't know, Tom, with permission of to come in to talk a little bit more about it, so people can get a better understanding? I don't know, Tim Wessel or someone, if that's, just asking, I mean, so somebody can come in and explain to us, that way we can get a better understanding in the audience and the people on what the status is on where we're at and what's implemented and what's happening and where it's at.
I suppose we could, but I guess maybe it depends on how we want to frame the public outreach part. Do we want to feel like we're really knowledgeable and pretty decided before we have, public input? Or do we want to be kind of, whatever that Latin term is, blank slate,
Tabula rasa.
tabula rasa, and have the public come in and advocate for certain things.
I mean, I like to think I'm educated on it, but in reality, there's just so much, like Steve was saying, that's coming in and flooding in from.
Well, what we're deciding on, I mean, in some ways is really limited. I found out, because we're not able to consider, there's 5 different sorts of licenses. Yeah. Or 6, but there's 5, and we're only considering the retail part. The state isn't giving us the land use, the ability to deal with cannabis production, cannabis manufacturing, cannabis wholesaling, cannabis lab testing. It's just the retail part.
Well, what's not even clear with that is that's not anything we could opt in or opt out of, but it might still follow our existing land use regulations.
The other wholesale and production.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. We don't know that yet. So that's why there's still so much. I mean, I'd point you to table 1 and table 1.1, which are a lot to look at, but maybe in the next month before we have this conversation, what Steve did was look at the different types of licenses that there might be and kind of compare it to one of our uses in our use tables. And then on table 1.1 kind of showed where under our existing zoning scheme, they might be able to happen. So, if you sit down with a map, with the zoning map, and you kind of look at it and say, is this reasonable? Is this a good place to start, or are you gonna go the blank slate
Right,
and just listen to people's concerns?
right. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't advocating for one or the, I mean, I think we should approach it like, I mean, I guess I'm getting into the public outreach, part a little bit too, but, and I thought we were just gonna take 1 minute with this.
We can stop the
But you-
conversation,
yeah.
and this is just for you all to think
Okay.
about in the next month, because
Okay,
I will want to, I don't want, there's 11 months before retail sales, but we get calls. I mean, people are kind of curious, what is the town going to do? And our response is, we're waiting to hear from the state, but it would be nice to
Yeah.
at least have an idea of what we're thinking of.
should we go, would it be useful to go around the room and just actually everyone just say what they're thinking about how to deal with it? Or is that helpful, or maybe it's not?
I don't know if it's necessarily helpful. I mean, we might be curious. We might all be sitting here thinking the same thing.
Yeah, right. I see Prudence's hand. I did.
Well, I think that we should have some discussion about it before I don't want to go with the tabula rasa approach. And I've got some questions and so on about it, but we're getting pretty late. I'm really tired tonight, so I'd rather just table this till December. But I
Okay.
hope that we can, as a commission, have some discussion about it.
Right.
I second.
So how about now, between now and then, people, any questions or clarifications they had about it, maybe just directly email or call Steve
Yeah.
and Sue about it. Because I had a few points, like I wondered about, blah, blah, blah.
I don't know if
And then we'll
that's-
try to have a real, really hem it out next meeting on cannabis.
Well, it's just
Yeah.
2 seconds. That's why I was asking if you wanted somebody from the regulatory or like Tim to come in to sit, to give you at least some
Yeah,
information. Like I said, I don't know if you're following it on BCTV.
I only
Uh,
follow what Sue
Gotcha.
funnels us.
I just sit there on my
I looked
days
up
that
a
I'm
couple
just
articles.
downtime and I just watch the
Yeah.
Cannabis Commission on there, listen to their discussions of what's going on there in
Yeah.
Montpelier.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, it gets to the point maybe where, I don't know, just 2 hours a month. I don't know how much time we have.
There's a lot to
What do you think?
absorb
Yeah.
and digest with this. They're not even at that place yet.
Yeah, right. There's a lot undecided. So
Okay.
can we do the infill, some justice?
Sure.
This remaining time? Okay.
So what I gave you was a couple pages out of the zoning for great neighborhoods. We had talked in the infill project, which is also going to be useful for the bylaw modernization, is to kind of look at the character of neighborhoods so that as we identify where infill can happen, we understand what the development patterns are. And so this was kind of a nice way for everybody to take maybe a street in a neighborhood and kind of assess what the dimensional standards and what the kind of building characteristics are like. So what it recommends is that, we decide the neighborhoods, the patterns maybe we're trying to replicate. I think that we could pick out a couple of neighborhoods where we know we have some zoning challenges. Clark Canal is one of them. Some of these more dense neighborhoods around downtown don't have dimensional standards that currently allow for much change, much less infill. They're not going to allow for infill. And so to begin to kind of document that so we understand the areas. And I think this forum does a nice job of a little bit of out on the street and a little bit of desktop, and we can point you to the mapping, platforms that you could look at for the desktop.
Great. Did people review it and think that this is something that we should move forward with?
So how are you doing I guess, how would you implement that? You would team up
Right.
people, or how's that?
I don't know. I mean, it could be done individually or in teams. I mean, everybody has different time available.
We could.
We got Clark, we'll show.
Yeah,
we
yeah, we're the
could-
same neighborhood essentially.
We could just canvas that. and
How do we get started? If,
I think the first thing would be to identify a couple of neighborhoods that we think, we want to begin to survey. And, we could send you the resources, the mapping resources. and everybody could just kind of pick a block and begin working on it. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm happy to go out with somebody if my schedule permits to kind of do some of it if you're not comfortable.
Yeah.
Um,
So if we choose the neighborhoods, to get that started, we need to choose neighborhoods, right? And
Mhm.
maybe if we can do that now, that would be great, right?
Yep.
But then everything else can happen outside the meeting,
Yes.
just by email and calls and stuff. Okay.
So like Steve or Brian or you can come out, and
I would say Steve and I could come out.
Dan Tyler maybe,
No, probably not Dan. I
Maybe
can't
the-
commit
maybe
Dan.
the governor.
I think he's,
the governor. We'll just come out walkie-talkies or whatever,
Yeah.
badges. And
I mean, do any neighborhoods, based off what Sue said or what you guys have read or your understanding of this, that jump out? Or do you want
I
to?
mean, a couple that I would say, I mentioned Clark Canal. That's an area we know we have some issues. I would say Green Street, that kind of neighborhood. It's another dense neighborhood.
The historic, the design review committee wanted to do something in line with Wentastiquet Ave and the other, I'm now forgetting the name of the
Tyler?
streets. Tyler,
Tyler.
yeah,
Tyler.
those ones behind Main Street.
Yes.
So that might be an interesting way for folks to meet each other as well, if there's interest. Because I think they wanted to help support this to some extent as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's the design review committee.
So the idea is to focus on the neighborhood, measure it, survey it, and then think about how to make infill more possible in it, in that specific neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay. And by infill, we mean not just more standalone lots with single family residences, but we mean also accessory residences and the missing middle and multi-unit.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, are there deep backyards? I don't know if that's a question on there. I mean, some of that is rear
so.
setback, outbuilding. Yeah.
Like South Main areas up there. too.
South Main would be great.
Yeah.
Those
Up
are
by
some
where,
dense neighborhoods.
Cross Street in those areas.
But
Back area.
why would we do it for neighborhoods that are already dense?
Right.
Part of that is because we know that we have some challenges with the setbacks already, so they might be tweaks for the bylaw modernization grant.
Yeah. And we're focusing on neighborhoods that are in the smart growth areas, right? That are close to downtown. So those are going to be dense in the scheme of things anyway.
Yeah.
But okay.
Prudence has a question.
Yeah, Prudence. Thank you.
Isn't it true that the more dense neighborhoods have less potential for infill?
Yes and no. I mean, some of these ones on Grove Street they're not as dense as Clark Canal, but Grove Street and Oak Street, some of those lots are deep and you could get another outbuilding back there. So accessory dwelling units and whatnot. So,
That's true.
I mean, I would say Clark Canal probably doesn't have a lot of room for infill. There might be
Right.
some that you're aware of.
But definitely South Main, up those areas, they do have.
Additionally, I'm not sure how feasible it would be without going really into like property cards from the assessor's department, but state statute does include internal ADUs as well as potential additions to housing stock. So looking at, say, old Victorians or farmhouses that ramble and things like that and saying, oh, this might be good for internal subdivision. I think that's a little bit less easily determined than the outbuildings, but that might be something folks could think about as well.
So that'd have to be like a separate line item or two.
Oh, yeah, I don't mean
Okay.
to suggest changes to the form, but just
well,
one thing that you might consider in already dense neighborhoods, just as, I guess, playing devil's advocate on where things could increase in density in already dense neighborhoods.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I guess my thing is like people could pick like say certain sections in West B. I definitely know West B has a lot out there as well. As far as our area, people who live out in that area. 'Cause,
Yeah, I mean, can we consider that area?
You know-
It's got its village center.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We could,
Uh,
yeah. So anything's on the table. So maybe,
Putney Road, like we were looking at.
I wouldn't look at Putney Road.
Okay.
so maybe based off that list, I see two hands up, but maybe based off that list, we all can decide by email to staff.
Sure.
And we'll get assignments, or if we don't like what we chose or our assignment, then we'll request staff that we do in a different neighborhood.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we're
But-
teaming
So
up
we're
with
saying-
someone. in other
You
words.
don't
Not
have to team
necessarily.
up. You can go out on your own or you can team up. That's fine.
I'll go with Team Tom.
All right, we can do 2 neighborhoods then.
Yeah,
How about
Base.
Doran and then Dan?
power breakfast.
I
Doran.
want Prudence. I was gonna say that I'm gonna have my availability in November is gonna be pretty hard. But in December I'd have some time, and I live on Main Street, so Green Street area would be very easy for me to do some of. Also South Main is possible, but I'd probably prefer to do it with someone else because I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Same here, brother.
Great. Yeah,
So-
teaming up with staff could be
Yeah, it
really
sounds like,
insightful.
I think
Team
that,
Steve or team.
yeah, I think
Sue?
that we'd be happy to kind of
I can
set up.
Educators,
Yeah.
Team Tom.
Yeah, maybe we can do
Steve
one or half.
volunteered himself before I volunteered.
Okay.
All right.
Your time is worth more.
I'll
Yeah.
buy breakfast and we'll get out there
Yeah.
and do it up, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And I don't think this is not something that needs to be done in November either,
No.
to your point, Doran, so
The spring.
completely.
all right, so
understand.
let's get the ball rolling with dates and neighborhoods, and maybe we all should do the first one with staff,
Yeah.
and then
just
we
to get
can
an
do
idea.
the next if we do by ourselves or in our own pairings.
I got coupons and.
Okay.
And Dan has his.
Oh,
hand.
Dan. Yep.
Yeah, it's just a quick question. I'm just wondering how much of the scoping or choosing of streets and so forth can be done virtually using, Google Maps or Streetscape or whatever. I'm just wondering, if it's all there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it can be done.
Hmm.
Dan, I think that is possible if you've got, what's the Google Earth
Google Earth, yeah.
is really good. I mean, I've got that downloaded, but I don't know if Google Street View is not as great as Google Earth,
Yeah, it
but
doesn't pan too many places in the
But-
back areas, yeah.
yeah,
You have to be more physical versus.
I think
that.
a fair amount of it. And just so you know, I mean, we're gonna be doing blocks, not entire neighborhoods, so.
Okay.
Just to get a feel of it. So I don't view this as a 3-hour project, you might be out there for 45 minutes kind of thing.
Great.
And it's possible I go to BCTV and we could film this. or no?
No, maybe
I
after
don't
we get
think
a
we
little
can get
practice.
BCTV out there, but you're welcome to
Well,
film
no, I
it
can
on your
borrow the
phone.
camera.
Oh,
yeah.
that's right, you're
Yeah.
training, yes.
I was gonna say on whose budget.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Here's volunteer
It's
time.
free. So it's
We like
breakfast.
free.
All right.
That's it.
So with a few more minutes, and I think we've got a way forward with that, leaning on staff again to get us rolling with that. Thanks them for that. I've never seen a planning commission in a smaller town that doesn't have staff, but I'd like to sit in on a couple of them and see the different dynamic there and the lack of effectiveness. They probably lean on the Wyndham Regional Commission a lot.
Yes and no.
Oh, okay.
We have
If they have a
Marlboro's
project, we do.
new plan if you want to read Marlboro's.
Okay. So for the last, well, there's no public, Venom fell over, but so I guess the Venom's hand's not up, so no public.
Sorry.
And in the new business agenda suggestions here, I put a little idea of my own, which is kind of a more fundamental thing to that Preston lot suggestion I had last time. Gary and I were bouncing the ball around a while back about parking. And we're like, there's barely any signage for the transportation center. And we kind of thought for parking lots too, but actually there's a fair amount of signage for that. It has its own weaknesses but anyway. And basically, yeah, I looked up and down Main Street and some of the side streets. Well, let me frame it a little bit more. Right, the parking study through the planning department and maybe Commission 2 a few years ago determined that we have plenty of parking for the most part. Maybe Depot Street lot gets full on Friday and Saturday night, but there's a perception that we don't have enough, and some people want more, but we have plenty, and certain lots are definitely underutilized, like Harris and the transportation center, and the rates have been adjusted accordingly to try to incentivize people to use the transportation center. So that one has the lowest rates, but it actually has some of the worst signage. Newcomers into town may not know what transportation center means, right? That doesn't necessarily mean parking. So the word parking garage is nowhere. And when you actually go on Flat Street, the signage on the transportation center is a P, and it's kind of hidden, but the one for Preston Law is pretty bold. Why does that one have priority over that one? And actually, but though a tree blocks it from one direction, at least it's deciduous, at least it's not evergreen. But on Flat and Main, there's no signage sending people down to the transportation center. On Elliott Street, it's only one way. You know, at Grove Street in Maine, it's both directions. So it's like, why is High Grove and Harris better signed than the transportation center? So there's some deficiencies. So I suggest, I'm asking the Planning Commission if I come up with a little document that's a survey of the current signage with recommendations of how it could be improved. If the commission thinks that this is a good project,
I think it's a great project.
I would start us off, and then you guys could see it and chime in. And I will say that under the Planning Commission's in Vermont's powers and duties, giving recommendations on matters of transportation is one of our main things, in addition to land use and development, renewable energy, historic. So it's very much in our wheelhouse, even though we don't necessarily do it very often. Thoughts? I just heard from Gary.
Also, I went down to the transportation center, spoke to the team down there that work, and they're the ones that basically gave, not just what Tom and I have noticed, but their feedback on what improvements they would like to see, because they're the ones that work it, run it, do collections and all that, so they know, you know, physically how the lots harmony. All of them.
Yeah, we could ask them about signage too. I want to keep it really focused just on the signage just for now, just
definitely
to try to get a little win, see how it goes.
Signage would be definitely my top
Cool.
priority.
Dan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick thing. I just was checking my Google Maps for the transportation center, and it comes up as Flat Street Parking Garage. So I'm not sure who named it or who claimed that the title, but it's interesting that, you know, signage is one thing, but a lot of people find directions on Google Maps or
Oh, sure.
you know. So
Yeah. Well, that's good that it says parking garage there at least, but yeah, that could be another thing. Yeah, we could
Like an audit of the different
make it,
mapping apps.
Apple Maps or whatever that is, and Google Maps, and
take a look and see what people are searching for. You can do all kinds of
good idea. Yeah, that's I'll call that e-signage. That'll be the second section of the document. Okay.
I mean, because
Cool.
technically it's on Flat Street, but it's also misleading because you can enter it from
Elliott.
Right.
not
Yeah, and at Elliott Street, there's a sign that says you know, public parking, but it's about 20-25 feet away from the corner. There's a pole that's closer. So I don't know. I mean,
So should it be named the Elliott Flat Street Parking?
No, we're not renaming.
Brattleboro parking garage. Yeah. So it sounds like there's some interest. So I'll develop this a little bit. Any other thoughts on, in addition to other things that we've put off or said that we'd talk about again, like the recommendations and the resolution and the commercial cannabis for next meeting? Any other thing that's really getting some people going? And
with the signage, is there a way to have people that are impaired to have that they can hear and figure out where they're going if this is a parking? I mean, because that sign, that thing is that, remember we were crossing, it's hard to hear even the crossing, that if it's a red light, you know, or one of these things that telling you when to cross. The only section that does that on Main Street basically is on Main Street and High Street, but the other ones don't tell you to cross. They don't even whistle like they used to. That's
for pedestrians, you're saying?
Yeah.
Hey, that'd be a great thing for the bike ped master plan, I think.
Hey, what do you think?
Great. Any other thoughts about things to look into or projects or something that someone wants to propose next time?
Not too many projects.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we've got a lot.
Holidays coming up, you know, Stratton.
Yeah, this was a pretty full agenda. So I remember the former chair sometimes would have, you know, encourage us to have special meetings in between. So I don't know if you guys want to go that route, but I'd like to keep aspiring to be really productive within just 2 hours a month, but and that's hard to do. Yeah, I see one thumbs up. Okay.
We could get a subcommittee to
Yeah. After that solar one, I don't want to join a subcommittee for a while. Great. Can we close?
Yeah, I move that we end the meeting.
Great. Second from anyone?
See Prudence. Yeah.
All right. Doran,